Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 3, Episode 6.
Welcome back, friends, for our most involved episode to date. Today, I wandered a few blocks from my store to this somewhat renovated restaurant bar venue. One of my favorite places to hang out, called The Plus. Our guest today is a hustler. Welcome, Mr. Benny Haas.
Well, hello, and thank you all.
So I mainly know you through your son, Aiden, because he skates. So you've been coming around the shop for a long period of time, buying him various things. And then after that, I realized that you own The Plus. I was like, oh, sick. That's where I like to drink beer. So now I feel like we've had a relationship for a while. But tell me a little bit about yourself, things that maybe people don't know. You own a bunch of things in town, but talk about yourself a little bit.
Well, and you hit it on the head. I try to do my best to be the wallflower in that aspect. I'm not the one to pound my chest, but usually the one that gets things done. So that's always been kind of, I don't know, just like you said, the hustle in itself is kind of the game that I've always enjoyed. Being that entrepreneur that I've been wired that way since I was little. My mother, growing up in Chippewa Falls, we'd go to Prangieway and I would buy penny candies and sell them in for 5 cents and throw them in my lunch bags and sell them in my backpack. So, that hustle's been there since probably 7 or 8 years old. So this has been kind of just a thing where, I don't know, and my parents have been smart enough and dumb enough to believe in me to kind of, throw some weight behind me every once in a while and just always encourage me to kind of jump off when most people would have been like, you should sit down.
Sure.
So,
no. What was the first investment then you did? Did you just buy some properties that you then rented to people, or what was the first move that you made?
Even in high school, I had a baseball card shop, out of my parents' old motorhome that they didn't sell, and he was sitting in the yard. So it was, Benny's baseball card shop open in the summer. I made $700. I was 12 years old, hustling some, baseball cards and basketball cards. That was that's still amateur stuff. No, I had, that standard thing of everybody in high school wants to get your cool car, or your senior year, your parents, either if you were rich, your parents bought you this fancy car. Well, my parents were not that situation. So they were save up money. And I was going to try to compete with some of my friends, saved up some money, didn't end up, was too afraid after working that hard to, spend it on a car to go well, that's a waste of money.
Right.
So I drove a pretty redundantly crappy Lumina through high school and college. And when my, sophomore year, everybody's doing that. And I went to Winona State. So everybody's doing that run for looking for dorms or other apartments or stay in the dorms. And I was looking at these rent rates at that time. And I looked at my mom and dad. I'm like, would you guys co-sign? So I bought my first house at, I think it would have been 18 and a half, almost 19 at that time. And just that was the first kind of big move, I guess, at that point. So
sure. Do you still own real estate that you rent to tenants in that way, or do you just do commercial stuff at this point?
It started. So we bought the first house. It was on Lafayette Street in Winona, and then I bought another one in Center Street. And actually, that's the first spinoff of kind of the business act, the idea of online sales, or kind of seeing the other side of the coin. So complaining about at that time, you sell your books, you sold your real estate, you had a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you wrote your address with a picture of it, and you had the little pieces of paper you cut with the number, to call and stuff like that. And you lined them up next to the library. And that was how you rented your houses and your apartments. And I was kind of struggling because at that time it was a 3-bedroom house and people were calling for 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, needed 4 baths or whatever. It was just annoying. And I'm like, they can't read the sign. And one of my friends just happened to say hey, we should take your pictures of your house and throw them up on a one-page web page and just promote that, tell everybody to go take that. And I was like, and this is still mid 90s or
sure.
Early 2000s. And I was like, I just got an email address, or I'm I don't even know how these things work.
Yeah.
So that was the first kind of collaboration we did for starting our own website company at that point. So we started findaplacetolive.com. Then we worked on textbookdeals.com, and then a touch of art was our third website that we were working on, which at that time in Winona State, if I was an art major, and if you didn't basically sign up for a gallery show for your senior year, you were like SOL. And there was a little coffee shop across the street that you could offset and do your senior show, but otherwise people were staying another year to get signed up. And I was like, can we do this virtually? So that was a touch of art. And then how life takes you, I ended up back in Eau Claire, leaving college, managing the green mill here in Eau Claire, and was still working on still had some businesses still in Winona, still working on some stuff, and was pitching it to one of the art majors that was one of our waitresses. And I was like, what do you think of this? She's like, that's great, but Eau Claire needs an art supply store. I was like, really? And then fast forward about 9 months later, we opened right where we're sitting in right now. This became Benny Haas, which was an art supply store. That was 2002.
Was that your first storefront? Your
First storefront
business
in
here in Eau Claire?
Yeah, I was managing the restaurant across the street, and we were talking about this, and Aiden was just born, and so it's kind of ironic. Here's my 18-year-old just turning 18 yesterday, and I'm talking about his first year of life, and we were living in Halley. I was managing 2 restaurants, working 70, 80 hours a week, and I'm like, this is exhausting. This sucks. I need a change of pace. And just happened to look out and see a little for rent sign in the window here.
Sure.
And just called the number, and everything moved really fast after that.
Well, and you said to me a long time ago that you sold primarily online for that business, right? That's where a lot of the profit
it didn't start that way. It ended up that way. So I mean that was originally. I mean, it was brick and mortar. Everybody came in, and it was good. I mean, it always paid its bills, but never was going to make any money. Mm-hmm. It was 7 days a week, 6 days a week, always kind of working just to kind of like maintain. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of work to not make anything.
Well, I see. That's what I think is really funny is people who aren't entrepreneurs a lot of times just assume if you own a store that you make a lot of money.
Oh.
And you're like, well, there's a huge spectrum there. Some small stores make a ton of money, but it depends on the industry. There's a reason some people own a whole bunch of different businesses. There's a reason you see business owners that still bartend and stuff. There's a huge range there. So what currently, as far as like actual businesses, which businesses do you own in Eau Claire?
So right now we have, as for like kind of the retail side, we have the Rev, we have the Plus, and we have the Metro. So other than that, there's real estates and different things like that, but those are like the 3.
So how did that transition happen then from doing art store to wanting to be like bar, restaurant, venue like type thing? Because those are pretty, centered around arts, I guess, in a way, but very differently.
Yeah. So, going back on that, so managing green mills, I managed green mills and worked in restaurants since I was like 16, 17 years old. So that part wasn't too far off from knowing how to wash dishes, to cook, to bartend and serve. So that part wasn't that hard. It was, think about it. We're sitting here and all of a sudden the restaurant comes up for sale, and I had just, quote unquote, retired from the green mill, bartending like 1 or 2 nights a week. And I was just kind of like, all right, I'm done. I've been doing this for 10, 15 years. I'm kind of tired. I'll buy a bar when I'm 65 and, 10-person capacity bar somewhere and, hang out with your friends and buddies and just basically have that kind of retirement. Right. And that was kind of my vision. And then the restaurant kind of in a few different orientations kind of kept on landing on my lap. And I finally said, all right, we should pull this trigger. So
when did you buy the Plus? Because that was like only a handful of years ago or something, right?
It's 8 years ago. We just celebrated, actually the day we closed, St. Patty's Day was our 8-year anniversary.
Okay, so not really that much longer than my shop, because I've been there a little over 6 years. Because I've gone to the Plus, obviously it was called Pizza Plus before, but I've been going there since forever. So it seems to me like the Plus, I guess I personally appreciate the Plus a lot, specifically because there's not a lot of all ages venues, and you guys seem to have really cultivated a really huge music and stand-up comedy, in particular. But it seems like that's really been cultivated just through the Plus. And then from there you expanded, and was it still the art store directly before you opened the Rev?
Yeah, we did both for up till, I want to say this,
because Rev was 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 or 3, and it took us about 6 months, 9 months to remodel this space because we did it ourselves. So I didn't hire out. So on top of it was kind of going back and forth, running a restaurant and remodeling this place to be turning the Rev. So yeah, the art store has only been closed 3-4 years now.
Sure.
So it was still doing its thing, and then because Benny Haas was down here since such an earlier time, we kind of but absorbed a lot of other restaurants or businesses downtown that didn't, at that time, downtown was still kind of a ghost town. So like we picked up cupcakes, we started a tea shop, or we took, so it's all these other businesses kind of come under the umbrella of, there was framing, there was like more, we had photography studios in the back. So Benny Haas became this kind of like, black hole of goodness of like sucking in all these other businesses to kind of still keep their, their brand alive.
Yeah.
And so that was still at that point, we're doing everything. So it was a success in that aspect of still surviving the long run.
Sure.
But it was, honest to God, it was a loophole of sitting at City Hall and discussing how to extend liquor licenses. Sure. And they're like, as long as your buildings are contiguous and owned by the same entity, you can extend your liquor license. And I was like, done. So we're remodeling this. We're going to shut her down and go this direction.
So because I don't remember far back enough with Pizza Plus anyways, I don't think they were really used as a venue besides like birthday parties and stuff. Maybe they did music and stuff.
They started to. Their managers, or the people that were managing it, started an open mic, and that was starting to get some good ground, and they were doing a good job of running it that way.
So when you opened it, did you do it right away, like open mic and run it yourself? Did you hire somebody right away to kind of like take care of that part? How did open mic, like, I guess, originate and then become kind of what it is now?
I was fortunate, and I guess I've always been fortunate enough. My mantra, one of the mantras is always you give to get. And if you do that, you often by times get surprised of having the people that are around you that'll step up to be like, I could do that. So at that time, I had local guy, Sean Jones, lived in Eau Claire, kind of stepped up, and he's like, he was in bands and different things like that, had some of the equipment, and he's like, I'll run it. So that was kind of the start. And his vision actually was more of, not just an open mic music set, but like let people, if they want to do spoken word, they want to do everything, like let's keep this open for like an artisan experience, not just a musician experience. So that's how it kind of grew out of that.
Yeah, I think the Plus has kind of become that weird, like in a really good way, safe space.
Yeah.
Like it's always intimidating to get on stage for the first time for sure. But you guys have had huge shows at the Plus, but then you've had like really just quiet open mics where people go up and just say one random joke. It's kind of cool how it's just like really open and accepting to everybody, which I think is part of what has cultivated the music scene to like, and like comedy and other things. But I think that's part of why the scene has grown so much, because we actually have a huge scene in Eau Claire in comparison to a lot of like towns this size. And people, I think, underestimate how important spaces like the Plus are. You know what I mean? Having those little spots for people to go up for their first time and start like gaining some traction. Because when you don't have those, the scene just doesn't like happen then.
Yeah, no, and you hit it. Everybody's used to like, in major metropolitan areas like, First Ave or, those are all great. And those artists that play those large stages, even the Pablo here, but they all start off of small venues and open mics and different things in every little small community, and that's how you get to the big stages. You have to hone your trade and work on your jokes or work on your music, and to get to that point. Oftentimes open mics, we've watched more, not even necessarily like marriages of actual relationships, but marriages of artists come together of being like, really liked your singing, or I liked your guitar solo, or like, do you want to start a band? And we have witnessed that time and time again, and it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought when you guys took over, or in general, like when I was a kid, I would have never thought the Plus was going to kind of be like the music hub.
Yeah.
Because that's not really what you think of, especially when it was called Pizza Plus. It was just like this little pizza place bar, but then all of a sudden it became, the venue for a lot of stuff.
Well, and you'll get this in business in general. You'll have a lot of people tell you have to be one thing and only be one thing. And we fought that a lot. There's a lot of kicking and screaming of people telling us, like, you just need to be a restaurant. You can't be a restaurant and an event center. You can't do these things. And I was like, why can't I be a birthday party location on Saturdays till like 2:00, and then we shift into dinner, and everything else, and have a metal concert or a hip hop show later that night. The crowds and everything changes throughout the night and throughout the day. I guess I've always was proud of that.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily a bad thing. And at times, your branding and your messaging can get misconstrued sometimes. But at the end of the day, I think you hit it on the head. Parents that are having birthday parties still know it's a safe place. The parents dropping off their kids later for a comedy show or watch their favorite rock star, locally feel safe because this place is a safe place as well. So it covers that gamut, and as long as you put that out, it's good.
Yeah. Okay, so going back, you bought the Plus. You had already had Benihana's. Okay, you already had Benihana's. And then it was in a real short time frame, right, that you opened the Rev and the Metro. Which one came first?
They were almost simultaneous. The Rev came first, but then the Metro was, I mean, it was one of those insane years of let's remodel 2 different businesses and launch 2 businesses at the same time.
Sure. Well, we had talked about it a little bit about how like opportunities come up, whether you absorbed this opportunity or whatever, cupcakes or whatever else you were doing. That must have been the case a little bit with the Metro, right? Like Boys and Girls Club building was opening up and there wasn't really a whole lot of people interested in taking it, or like how did that?
I mean, it sat on the market. It sat on the market for at least a good year. And I mean, I think it's a big space. 15,000 square feet is intimidating, on itself. And one of our, like, when I say we, I'm talking about my family. So it's like we're a family business. So like we had sold some property in Halley, some duplexes, and we needed to roll them over so that there's a term for it's called a 1031 exchange. So you transfer your funds. And so we had some funds sitting in this escrow account that you had to reinvest. And our original plan was looking at, we knew the building was for sale and somebody would eventually buy it. So we actually contacted the property at the end of the street, which was 202 Seaver Street, which was an old laundromat, was for sale as well. So we bought that, it had a parking lot, and we're like, whoever buys the big building will probably need a parking lot at one time or another. So we'll buy this building and sit on it, and if the time comes to play, we'll tear it down and offer a parking lot for whoever buys this big building. And that was our original kind of play of like sit, wait, and then the situation, we did a tour of the old Boys and Girls Club, and just so happened that we were going to get married, and I proposed to my girlfriend at the time, and we were looking at venues, and I'm like, this is garbage to how much people are going to pay to like rent a space for somebody else. And I was like, I could put that as a down payment. So that's honestly, that was kind of one of the main things is we were going to get married, and we turned it into a wedding venue at that. The original concept, we were going to actually put a grocery store in the space, because that was one of those crazy ideas that everybody's telling me, like, you don't want to open a grocery store. And I was like, well, downtown needs a grocery store. So, if there's a need, there's an ability. So I just look at it that and was just kind of challenging at that point. At the end of the day, it didn't work out. And I think it worked out in the better way of turning it into an event center versus a grocery store. But at the end of the day, I've been laughing during this pandemic. We've been selling more grocery items online than we have anywhere else, and we'll come back to that. But, so the Metro. I mean, the Metro in itself was one of those ideas. Cullen is our, helps with the booking manager, and he's kind of our event manager. And we were missing out on some amazing talent that was coming through the Chippewa Valley, driving from Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison to Minneapolis, going out west. And we get tapped out by just our capacity at the Plus. So we knew there was an ability and a need to have these larger talented shows, these concerts, rock shows, comedians coming through this community that are driving right by, that would do an easy stop to kind of offer the Chippewa Valley something that you'd have to go to some other major metropolitan area to go see. So that was kind of like, we knew that there was an ability to, have that larger venue, event center kind of thing. So that was...
It seemed like a natural progression. I mean, because if like a lot of the shows you guys have had at the Plus, it's just like, it's just overly packed, and you could probably sell way more tickets if you had a bigger venue for some of those past shows. So I think it just kind of made a lot of sense for like the natural progression of, you guys have this open mic thing that's kind of becoming too big for the bar to like really be successful, because no one can hear anything because everyone's trying to play these fucking big shows or whatever. Yeah. Like it just kind of made sense then to open that. And another thing I want to say about like the grocery store thing, like I guess one analogy I like to think of is like throughout your life you're always going down like this hallway there's no real end like goal, right? But you're going down this hallway. If you have all of the doors closed, then that's fine. You'll just go down this hallway, but you're not going to have any cool opportunities ever open. Well, if you open all of them, it doesn't mean you have to go in, right? Like you can open them and think about it and then go, well, maybe a grocery store, and spend, a couple days doing research or whatever, or however long. But until you actually make the huge investment, then you didn't go in the door anyways. So it didn't hurt you at all, right? And different opportunities will open up if you just like stay open to that possibility.
And you hit it on the head. My wife, one of the biggest cheerleaders I have. And when she was sitting there, she's like, you sat there for 9 months. Every morning you'd wake up, I'd come out, she's like, I'd have to go to the bathroom and see you in your office saving information, Googling, trying to figure out how to like operate and run a grocery store. Because I mean, I looked at it as like, it's food. There's costs. I've done retail. I kind of get it, but there is way more to that. There's more of a science in that aspect. But I mean, if you know that, I look at our downtown, much less any downtown across the country, across the world. Your downtown is your heart of your city. So if your downtown is dying and your left arm is, you work out with your left or your right arm all the time and it's huge, but your heart's dying, you're going to eventually, it doesn't matter how strong your right arm is or anything like that. And I think that's kind of what happened in the city of Eau Claire. It happened to a lot of municipalities. The malls went out in the suburbs outside and, these arms got really big, but their heart of their city was dying. And until these municipalities, these cities and towns across the country started to refocus back on their downtown, then it helps kind of give strength to the whole body. And at that time, I hated the fact that I had to get in a truck to go to the grocery store. It still drives me nuts. I still would love just to have I'm still itching, but to try to do some like maybe a bodega-esque style of like.
Yeah, we have Just Local Foods, which is great. It's a like natural organic food store, but it is kind of expensive, so like not everyone's trying to buy all their groceries there. So it's nice that there's like at least a little something, but I agree. I mean, everywhere I've traveled, it is strange that there isn't a grocery store within walking distance because all of them are kind of off. They're definitely not anywhere downtown, that's for sure. I think the downtown, as far as having like being the heart, I totally agree. And one thing I think a lot of people don't really think about is because of the business owners themselves are so emotionally invested in that particular city. And when you go to like things like malls, well, then it's all either, not all, but primarily franchise stores or, corporate locations of all these other businesses that have no actual interest in the city itself. So going back to like how you grow a music scene, you're not going to do that at a mall. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what the store is about or whatever. There's no community that's built behind it. But when you go downtown, all of them, even if one person, right? Like we have some wealthy people in town that own a lot of things, but even if one person owns a lot of the spaces, they still probably lease it to local business owners that still feel strongly about wanting to provide this, that, or whatever. Yeah. They really are the beating heart to like everything.
And Main Street in itself is that. I mean, it's that. If you're a business person or an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you're going to be at the gas station, you're going to be at the grocery store, and you're going to see your customers. You're here versus, global corporations that don't care about your community. They don't know if that store that's in that city is just number 486 out of their chain of stores. You never see the CEO come into your grocery store and stuff like that. Right. But local businesses, those people. And I think that relationship between the customers and business owners is the key, is that fact of like, that you're not going to take advantage of your customers, and your customers aren't going to take advantage of the businesses as well, is because it's a relationship. You provide food or you provide clothing, you provide whatever, and, skateboards, yeah. There's that give and take that you appreciate, and that builds community.
Yeah, and then we're not off on little islands either, Like if it's all corporate stores, they don't care about who leases the store next door. It doesn't really matter. But my customers, even though it's a totally different type of place, still go to your places. Yeah. And then they still go over to the Thai restaurant next door or whatever. You know what I mean? So we all share the same clientele because everyone's downtown culture, which makes all of us business owners want to work together. And it just builds the community up as a whole, which kind of leaves a lot of doors open for cool events and stuff to happen. I was talking to one of the city council members, and who knows if this will ever happen, because this is just a dumb idea of mine that I think is a brilliant idea of mine. But I've gone to a lot of bigger cities. I'm sure you have too. But for example, in Tokyo, there's a whole area in a retail shopping area where they shut the streets down for Saturdays and Sundays, so it's only pedestrian traffic. I think, at least during the 3 months of summer, it would be cool as shit if we shut down Barstow to be only foot traffic, because the parking is always taken anyways. Mm-hmm. If we made it only foot traffic from the bridge down to, I don't know, the bus station or something, say, but have it just be foot traffic, so that way during all the middle of the street, all of us business owners could have sidewalk sales and stuff set up. Yeah, I think that would be fucking cool. Plus, you could have people street performing, whatever. But I think it would end up promoting much more culture to downtown. Because if you look at even just what the farmers market did, that side of downtown was totally dead. Now people want to rent all that space because there's so much more foot traffic. So, but that's just a dumb idea of mine. But I really want to do that at some point in the future. If people have brought it up to me, why don't you think about going city council? And I have a lot of things going on still. Maybe in the future future at some point, but that's like an eventual goal of mine. One thing I did really want to bring up, I don't want to talk about a lot of negative things, but the pandemic, obviously, like we're still in the heart of the pandemic because we're recording this on July 17th. It's like affected everybody. It's making it impossible for me to do business because a lot of people don't realize how many cogs there are to the system, from when you want to like design a skateboard to when it gets to you. There's like all these different places that things and parts go through. So I can't like get trucks and wheels and components and stuff. Has been really difficult for me to get. The big glaring one that I think everyone looks at is like social gatherings aren't a thing now. Well, businesses based around social gatherings, such as like all of these ones. Yeah. I guess like you said, you've been selling some groceries online, but like, how have you been able to handle it? And then like, what's the plan when things do open? I assume capacities are going to be limited. Like, what are you thinking you're going to be able to do with the venue and stuff?
Well, we keep on obviously looking into our crystal ball to try to foresee how the future is going to be. And those are, hard questions to kind of foresee. I mean, to do that. I think if we all do our things and do our part to kind of like, either it's just buying time or being smart and wearing masks and washing hands and doing our thing in the meantime, I do think we'll eventually get back to some sense of normalcy. I don't think it'll be a new normal, but I think at that time, the 6 months, a year away from having that, and when it does come, it'll just come roaring back. That's a pretty scary or dystopian kind of thing of like, eventually the sun's going to come out. But I mean, in the meantime, we're not going anywhere. We're fine. I mean, knock on wood, we're very fortunate. And you said doors open when the pandemic hit and the grocery stores were out of bread. They were running out of yeast. The grocery store supply chains were out of inventory, but across the country, restaurants were closed and all of their inventories were sitting in their wholesalers, different wholesaling line, different, supply chain management. We're sitting on products. And for a time, when I said we were selling stuff online, we were the number one seller of yeast in the country. I mean, we were doing 1,800 packs of, 1 pound packs of yeast. My family were, doing 17, 18-hour days, just help. I mean, I think to some degree, we thought we were just kind of doing our civic good of trying to make sure that people needed bread and we're just going to push this out and we're, a necessity thing, such to the point where the post office was dropping off large cages and picking up, packages twice a day. And I think you said that seeing an opportunity, grabbing it in the meantime to kind of, survive what you can or do what you can do, pivot when you need to, and finding those opportunities. I mean, that's what's kept us going for now. And fortunately, the plus in itself, from the day we bought it, there has not really been ever really a slow day. The first summer was a little rough, and we probably should have remodeled bathrooms and did things like that. But on a limited start on budget, there's not really an availability or option to do that. But we've had people like, why don't you redo your floors, or why don't you do this? And I'm like, when am I going to shut down for, a 4-day, 5 days in the middle of a busy week just to remodel anything, much less? So that's been the blessing for us, is we've taken that time to remodel our bathrooms and new bar floors and update what we needed to. So when we do finally open, I think people will be pleasantly surprised of like, wow, they just didn't take this time off to go sit on the beach. We're working, I promise everybody.
Yeah. I think it's super important to recognize when we have all this opportunity of time to like use it wisely, because we always talk about, at least I talk about on the show a lot with other entrepreneurs, that money's not really like your biggest resource, because like money kind of comes and goes. You can always make more money. Like there's different ways to get revenue streams, 17-hour days versus a regular 8 or whatever. Like you can always make more money, but you don't always have more time. And typically your time is so restricted. That's how I feel all the time. Like I have all the freedom in the world, but like I have all these obligations and things that I have to do. And I've kind of been going through this whole like transition over the last like year where I kind of reached what I wanted to do with my store. And I really see myself just hiring a GM here in the next handful of years to take care of the store and like kind of put it more in the skaters' hands. So that way it's not me there all the time. Cause it is like living the dream and I really love it, but I know a lot of other people would really enjoy that too. And I'm like getting slightly burnt out on being there all the time because I've been doing that particular thing for so long. So then all of a sudden with taking the winter off and traveling and now this epidemic and everything, or the pandemic and everything, like I've been able to spend a lot more time doing like artwork and then realizing like, hey, I'm pretty good at like running this whole Instagram thing. I know how to do that type of thing. I'm pretty good at like networking and figuring out mutually beneficial collaborations to make money, like doing the candles that I did, you know, or like me and Scotty Benz, we just did a skateboard deck that like is selling to his customers that don't skate. So like, I want to pursue doing that type of thing more, and having all this time off / I'm not off. I'm definitely at the shop all the time. So people can come say what's up, but it's way slower, you know? So I have a lot more time to like kind of rethink what is it that I like really want to spend my time doing, which is cool, because that opportunity probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. So
and I don't want to take away from the fact of like when I said 17 hours and you hit that on the head, like this has definitely been a walkabout, a respite time of self, reflection, and that fact of like, all right, I don't need to kill myself 7 days a week, which, I mean, even for my wife and I mean, we've been doing, the restaurant in 8 years. I mean, we took off a few days here and there, but for the most part, it's working every day. And even if you're off, your phone's blowing up. You're still doing orders. You're still taking a little bit of time every day. Good or bad, I know that's just how I'm wired. So it doesn't seem like work to me. But at the same point, during this epidemic, it's been kind of nice to be like, let's cut out and go for a walk. Or like, I mean, I love people. I love hanging out and that, the social interactions of community. But I mean, we always call it like, it's the shaking babies, kiss. Oh wait, sorry, no, I'm dyslexic. Kissing babies, shaking hands kind of mentality. You're working the room, and sometimes there's nobody in the room, so it's like, let's go do a walk. Let's go drive around for a while and cruise or something. Just to kind of get out, experience at least each other, and kind of do that. I'd feel really bad for a lot of people that are stuck by themselves.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs in general, you have that mindset of like always looking for opportunities because it's exciting.
Yeah.
It is work, but it's exciting and it's thrilling. So you don't feel like you're constantly working. I talked to Kyle Lehman about it on like season 1. We were talking about how we just want to both get to the point where we don't have to do anything we don't want to do anymore, where we can just outsource and hire people to do the different things that they're good at, that I'm not particularly good at. And then I don't have to feel like I work at all, even though I'm working 40, 50, however many hours a week. I'm just doing stuff that I actually want to be doing, in which case, like, it's not really work. It's more what I would do anyways. Even like doing artwork, like I've been investing a lot of my time into doing artwork, and I've been doing digital art and stuff lately too. And yes, it is just like a stress reliever, but my entrepreneur mindset is like, okay, well, if I get good at this, I can be making graphics, and then I can be using them for collabs with people, and therefore increase profit margins and make money. Therefore, my time is wisely used, which is wisely used enough, even if I was just drawing. But that's like my mind is I'm always trying to do that. So I end up filling up my time, but I'm filling it with stuff that I really want to do. So it's like not really a problem. Okay, so outside of work, like I said, I started painting, but I also scuba dive a lot. I still skateboard as much as I have time. I ride my motorcycle and I ride my bicycle. I sit in my new hot tub now that I overpaid for, but it's awesome. I have a lot of different things that I like to do outside of work. I tend to tie work in with them too much. Like I love to travel. Well, then I end up lining up when I'm traveling, doing interviews or like in general, trying to network, even though I really just wanted to travel. So for yourself, what are some things that you like to do in your spare time? Not that you have hardly any, but what are some hobbies that aren't necessarily about business?
Well, I love that you said you bought a hot tub, and we've been basically at 90 to 100 degrees for the last month.
Dude, 3 days after I bought it, it turned 90. Yeah.
I was like, this is the wrong time, but no, it's all good. I'm just laughing about that. No, I mean, honest to God, being around family, it's one of those things when unfortunate or fortunate to be wired like with my brain, it is kind of always in that work mode. So, it's still just like you said, no matter what you're doing, you're still kind of, if you're going for a walk, you're talking about whatever. I am such a dork. I listen to NPR all the time. It's like the podcast or in the radio or stuff like that. Such to the point when Aiden was little, he knew like the theme song to NPR or WPR growing up. Like, what matters to you? And I'd always get a chuckle about that. So, it's just at the end of the day, just family and friends, just kind of, figuring out relationships. Being active as much as you can. As you get older and like you said, as your body breaks down, there was a time and a place that I was either always, longboarding or, wakeboarding in the summer, snowboarding in the winter, doing, either playing hockey, amateur or whatever. And as you get older, it's like, oh, and granted, I'm not 90 years old, but you definitely feel it as you get older and you're like, whoa, I am not 20 again anymore.
Well, that's why I found like cycling is fun. Like
Yeah.
I biked across the state last year and there's no impact. And I'm like, dang, like I can grow and like get better at this and I don't get hurt. This is kind of tight. I've never been interested prior. And now all of a sudden, like some of those things are sparking interest. Going back to family a little bit though, how cool is that? Like your wife, like, and you own this place, but this is kind of her. So we're sitting in the Rev right now.
Yeah.
This is where we're recording. So the Rev is kind of like her thing, really, right? And then Aiden now is 18, but he's been working with you at the Plus now for quite a while.
He started at 14 washing dishes. So, I mean...
So you get to have your whole family involved in business. You see them all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, and honestly, I think that's even on a relationship level of different things of like how you should judge who you want to marry does definitely help if you ever, well, granted, if there's ever another epidemic and you have to be stuck with somebody all the time. I mean, Kate and I were already at that point of understanding of like we work together 24/7. We may be running around with our heads cut off in different venues, but usually still run through and grab a smooch and go back to our whatever location we're in at that point, putting out whatever fire. But I mean, no, I think there's definitely something to be said about, just that kind of building a relationship in that aspect. But working with making this a family business has been awesome. I mean, Aiden, growing up in this industry, he wouldn't be the kid if it wasn't for this place. And he'll be the first one to say that, learning how to give a handshake at 14, 15 years old and, locking eyes with whomever he was shaking hands with was always kind of one of those things. And he's been raised around adults and knows how to have adult conversation, even though he was a kid and still could, fall down and pick his nose or be it whatever, little life lessons along the way.
Well, it's cool because the family extends then beyond blood to like a lot of these employees. I tell people all the time, especially like you work for Verizon, you work for Sprint or Walmart, whatever. People have way too much loyalty to their employers when it's that avenue, because that employer doesn't care about you in any way, shape, or form. You're kidding yourself if you think you do. You're like, oh, the other employees need me at this store. No, they'll hire somebody else, and that's not your problem. You shouldn't feel overly loyal because companies will take advantage of you. And when that mutually beneficial situation of employment is no longer mutually beneficial, they'll get rid of you in a heartbeat. However, with small shops, small businesses like ourselves, all the opportunity is there when you work for somebody, like if somebody works for you, right? Like regardless of what the wage amount is for whatever, look at like Cullen. That dude's like been able to like grow and learn. And granted, he's helped out a shit ton for sure.
Absolutely.
But the ceiling is just wide open when you work for a small business. I tell anybody who works for me in that way, I'm like, dude, you can kind of like do as much with this as you want. If all of a sudden you're like, you know what I want to do? I want to start offering skateboard lessons and make a whole camp and then have a whole thing. Be like, yeah, dude, tight. That works for me. Like,
Let me know what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly.
How can I help?
With a small business, it kind of becomes a little bit of a family because you get to watch people grow so much more than you would in like a regular employment.
Well, and you hit it on the head. It's one of the nicest compliments. I think some people take it as like a swipe at them if somebody else like starts their own restaurant or something like that. And I'd be like, to me, that's the nicest compliment. If they've learned enough from here to run off and start their own business, great. I'd put that as a feather in my hat of like, awesome. Either good or bad. I taught them the wrong ways or the right ways, or vice versa. I mean, they saw an opportunities, they realized that there was something to be done, and they ran with it.
And it's usually not completely competition anyways. A lot of times, like, there's a good relationship then, and you can just work together. Like, it just benefits everybody.
Competition is good.
Yeah. So you're involved in a ton of stuff in Eau Claire, obviously, like we talked about. The main hub being, right here, the Plus, the Rev, and now the Metro. What's been one of your favorite opportunities that arose during this time?
I mean, just in the general things, outside of just the actual businesses. I mean, going back on like the heart of your city, the art scene, I was fortunate enough to be one of the founding members of the sculpture tour program. And I still think that's still one of the coolest things that, came to our downtowns of having, different outdoor sculptures that are loaned here for 1 year by these artists to be able to showcase their work, decorate our streets. And, it gets people moving around, it builds that part of the community because they're walking by shops they would have never walked by, taking in the arts, having the art focused, be it's the physical arts of owning an art supply store for so many years, even the transition to having an event center where we're doing comedy and music and spoken word and different things like that and improv. It's still the arts. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about that's going to build that downtown, it builds that community of coming back to that. But the sculpture tour program, I'm still very proud of. Looking back, I'm looking at a sculpture through the window right now, of like, just to be able to like walk around and take in a new art every year.
Yeah, it's crazy that I feel, obviously a ton of people are well aware of it, right? But it's kind of crazy how few people know that it does exist and how incredibly cool it is that we have that. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been showing a lot of people that. Like, I love walking around downtown in general, especially once they redid all the sidewalks and streets. Now there's music always playing. It's just like kind of comfortable to walk around, even if you're not trying to go to a bar and you're trying to hide a beer in your backpack or something because you just want to be walking around and like enjoying the scenery. But yeah, the sculpture is changing all the time. It's super cool that we get to have that. It's like having a museum all the time that you don't pay for. It's super tight. So I'm really, really, really thankful that exists for sure.
And the Chippewa Valley's getting finally on it. We're going to have some more murals popping up across downtown too. And I think that'll be just like the sculpture program. We'll get people walking around admiring outdoor art.
I think that's, again, the natural progression. Like, that should have happened just with like how our city was moving, and I'm so stoked that it is going to be happening because it's just going to bring so much more foot traffic and more like soul to our city, So I'm super excited for that for sure. So talking about lessons a little bit, because you've obviously learned a shit ton from when you were, selling cards and selling snacks and shit. What do you think has been the most helpful lesson that you've learned so far through all your entrepreneurship that you think might be beneficial to others?
I think, well, just even in business, but in life in general. My uncle Mike would always talk about don't lie, don't steal, and always uppercut. And I remember he'd always say this line, and always trying to remember of what that actually meant. Like, why? I mean, don't lie, don't steal. Pretty self-explanatory. And always uppercut. And I was like, what's the point of always uppercutting? Because uppercuts never start fights, but they sure as hell end them. So there's going to be time and a place that somebody's going to, you don't have to like puff up right away. You can, it's all right to back down until it gets to that point, when you'll know when it's time to stop this. And not in the physical sense, but in the, just even it's time to like nip that in the butt, cut that toxic relationship out of your life, do these things, eventually people will take. And that's fine. It's good to give, but there's a time when they're taking too much, and it's just like, all right, it's enough. You've taken enough. It's time for you to move on.
Yeah, I genuinely think that most people are just really good people and want to help each other, but not everybody is.
Yeah.
The key is if you leave yourself open and be willing to chat and discuss things and see opportunities with people and explore relationships with people, just leave it open so you can meet these people, but then recognize when it's not mutually beneficial, you don't need that relationship anymore. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds kind of cold to talk about it that way, but really that's what it is, right? That's what friendships are. They're there for you emotionally. Maybe there's no financial, but they're there for you emotionally on the days that you need them, and you're there for them, whatever. But that's a mutually beneficial situation. When it's no longer benefiting both of you, then you just don't need it. There's 7 billion other people that would probably fulfill that need for that person. You don't have to be that anymore.
And getting stuck, and sometimes in business relationships or personal relationships, you're robbing yourself and you're robbing that person. If you cared about that person any which way or form at one point or another, to let them go to find their happiness, or vice versa for yourself to look for happiness, at the end of the day, that's what you have to do. You fail your way to success in this life. Get back up, dust off, move forward.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.